I'm Lee Buckner, your economics instructor. And in this video, I'm going to review the basic components of a labor market with a specific focus on how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the food service and hospitality industry. First thing to address is who is represented by the demand and supply in a labor market. In a labor market, demand represents the buyers of labor, meaning firms. In the food service and hospitality market, that would be businesses like restaurants and hotels. In labor market, the supply represents the owners of labor, the ones who are selling it, the workers. So this would represent hotel staff, restaurant staff, those sorts of people. With any kind of market, the first thing we want to identify is equilibrium quantity and equilibrium price. So on our basic labor market graph, we find where supply and demand intersect. From that point of intersection, we get on our x-axis a quantity measurement. This represents the number of workers in a particular market, both the number of people who are selling their labor, that's the supply, the workers, and the demand, the quantity demanded, that's the number of people being hired. Also from that point of intersection, you get your y-axis, price value. That represents wages paid in that market. So that would be something like the average wage paid to hotel workers or to restaurant workers. Now, for COVID-19, across the United States, when the pandemic started in 2019, many restaurants and bars and hotels and resorts were all forced to close for either a couple of weeks or in some cases a couple of months. The first immediate effect of this was to cause firms to want to hire fewer workers, right? If they're forced to shut down by the government, they're not going to employ people, they're going to want to fire people. On our basic labor market graph, that's represented as a downward slope in demand shifting to the left. It's a decrease in demand. When that decrease in demand happened because of the shutdowns, you got a new equilibrium point. We'll call this our 2019 equilibrium. At that 2019 equilibrium, the main thing that got a lot of attention in the media was this point here. The quantity of labor purchased in that market, and our people working in that market, dramatically reduced. Lots and lots of people wound up losing their jobs. Also, what happened as a result of the shutdowns at the beginning of the pandemic is the wages for workers in that market also fell. Important side note that's beyond the scope of this video, wages typically fall more for new hires than existing workers. That's due to a psychological theory called sticky wage theory. If you want to look into that a little more detail, very interesting. So that is essentially what happened in the first 6 months to a year of the pandemic as it relates to the food service and hospitality labor market. Dramatic reduction in number of employees and also reduction in the wages for those who worked in the market. At the same time, when demand was decreasing, supply also decreased. For a variety of reasons, a lot of people did not want to work in these jobs, or they were less likely to want to work in these jobs. Primary concern was exposure to COVID for people who had to work with the general public. That caused reduction in supply, shifting to the left. That reduction in supply further reduced the quantity of labor in this market. It did, though, have a slight positive effect of causing wages to go up a little bit, but probably not to where they were pre-pandemic levels. This strong back and forth between the demand and the supply in the hospitality market is what we saw through the first year and a half of the pandemic. But moving into 2022, there has been a huge resurgence in Americans' desire to go out to restaurants, to go out to eat, to go on vacations and use hotel services. That's caused the buyers of labor, the demanders, to have a dramatic increase in their demand. So what you see now, demand in 2022 for workers in the hospitality industry is something more like this, right? Employment has dramatically increased in these industries over the last year or so. I'm making this video at the beginning of 2022. That's led to tremendous increases in the wages paid to workers in this industry.